Hello, Svitlana.
Hello, Arne.
Nice to see you. I'm very curious about the topic today, about the smart moves today, because you said, or you mentioned, it's probably something I will not like too much. So now I'm very curious. What is there not to like in chess? What can it be?
So we're gonna look at an opening, and it's an opening that I personally like, but I feel like is not generally well liked, and it is the Alekhine defense. And I want to show the ideas behind it and how to counter it as white as well. So
Looking forward to this. Of course, I have my own private project about this opening. I was diving a bit deeper into it, and I thought it is actually quite amazing because it is far, far sharper than I would ever think it could be if you take the steps towards this. Now, for you at home, if you like this opening, if you like this series, thank you for always liking it. It gives a lot to the algorithm and the YouTube rhythm and all of that. So it makes us make more videos about this kind of thing. And thank you for always commenting. By the way, commenting underneath this video, you can see a source of links for this very lesson and some Alekhine games are in the ChessBase news article. It's also below the YouTube video. Well, Svitlana, I think it is your turn to tell us everything about this very special opening.
yeah, so this opening is named after Alexander Alekhine, who was the world champion, and I think he was one of the. I'm not sure if he was one of the first people to ever use it, but as a world champion, when you start playing something, it becomes more popular. So I do think he was one of the first great players who did use it. A few other world champions have used it. Like Bobby Fischer used it in a few world championship not matches, but like games. So it was never a main repertoire. Korchnoi also played it a bit, but nowadays it is not seen too often at the top level.
Yeah.
So the reason for that is, of course, the engines that you wouldn't want to go for something that's slightly worse or slightly inferior to, let's say, another opening that is more balanced, such as e4, e5. But I think this opening still has plenty of life for it, and I've played it a lot, not only at club level, but I've played it. I've played it even at this Olympiad against somebody weaker than me, but I still use it from time to time,
Cool.
and I think it's worth exploring. And although not as a main, not as a main weapon that you play all the time, and your opponents who know you can prepare against it, but as something you play every once in a while, and for online, I think it's also a pretty good choice.
And it's always good to get a little bit, and this is what this is mostly about, even if you have never played it, even if you never ever play this, but from what you're telling in this section we're having, you're giving some ideas, some tactics, some tips, some strategies, and this is so important and good to just know, even if you're playing against the Alekhine, or if you go like, listen, I don't know this opening well, I watched this course, I'll just go for this right now because I know the main ideas, I will think about the rest.
Yeah, I'll also I can give a few lines that I think are the best in my opinion for white, so that if somebody plays it against you, you can choose between those two. I have two that are favorite.
Okay.
That I think are the best weapons against it, as somebody who does play it. But yeah, it is played at top level online only. So, you will rarely see it in an actual classical game by the top 10. But online, it's played a lot. One of the main practitioners is Alexander Bortnik. He plays it a lot, and not just online, even I think over the board. I don't know about anymore. I haven't followed it, but
strong player.
That's actually how that might be the reason indirectly why I started playing it, because he's from my city in Ukraine. Like, we don't really know each other or anything, but he was a big star and like somebody everyone looked up to in our city. Him and his brother are both good players.
Yeah.
And I briefly I took a few lessons with his brother back in the day, and he's the one who showed me that opening, and that's why I feel like that's the reason why I play it now, is
Some
indirectly
nostalgia.
because the Bortnik brothers actually are one of the main people who played it in Ukraine and who made it, made it more popular back
Makes
in
perfectly
the.
sense. Nice.
Yeah, so we can start to look at some variations. So most of the time you're gonna see, you're gonna play this. There's basically two replies that you'll see from white, is that they'll play either knight to c3, more calm variation, and that avoids the main lines, and there's also e5, which is all the main lines. Sometimes if you play it on bullet, you might get some people who have pre-moved like either knight f3 or d4, and then you'll just get a free pawn. But that, of course, will not apply to anything else.
I sometimes think it's the other way around too often in bullet, that knight f3 is knight f6 is just this standard move against d4, and then okay, sometimes it's e4, I'll deal with it.
Yeah. So let's start with knight c3 because that one is very brief. So on knight c3 we can play d5, and this transposes to the Scandinavian. So you can also get this exact position by reversing d5 and knight f6. And it would be also a completely normal position to get out of the Scandinavian. Now, if white pushes, we're going to play this, and we will get not a transposition, but a very similar structure to the French. Exactly. But it's not a great type of French, I would say, because white's knight is on c3, which I don't see as an advantage for white. So I think it's a good position for black. Like, it's definitely not worse. So yeah, I usually you will see the pawn on c3. So now this d4 pawn is going to be a bit more targeted. So we can take it. We can play bishop e7. We can play a6. All the regular French plans, they just work a bit even better because the d4 pawn is not protected by the pawn. So this one, I never studied it, and it never really happened too much. You just need to know that you get a good version of the French.
And here is, of course, the nice Portuguese variation, a thing which I would prefer to play.
Exactly. This is very similar. Well, it can arise exactly from the Portuguese variation, which is another opening I play.
Yeah, we, by the way, took a lesson about this variation, so you have to check out our playlist if you want to check this
I think it was one of the more popular
lessons. Oh yeah, one of the most popular ones for some reason. Thanks.
Yeah. So here I would recommend to take, and in the Portuguese we sometimes sacrifice this pawn, but this is one of those variations that we don't really make this sacrifice and we just gain it back and play a more or less solid position. This is the game that I had at the Olympiad, is that my opponent played bishop here. I retreated the knight, continued development, played bishop f5. Actually, probably an important thing to note, that bishop g4 in these lines, although it's tempting, but it's one of the tactics to watch out for. You already know what it is, right, Arne?
Yeah, you just take on f7,
exactly.
give a check on g5, and win a pawn like that and destroy the castling. So yeah, white has a significant advantage now.
Exactly. So try not to fall for this trick. Always verify before playing bishop g4. Always verify whether bishop f7 works. So when bishop g4 doesn't work, we develop our bishop to f5 and then play the position calmly, just like that. And yeah, my game went on. It was, I wouldn't say it was the most challenging variation by my opponent, because they played h3 and developed the bishop like that. Eventually I just started putting pressure on the d4 pawn, and I ended up winning that d4 pawn and a couple of moves after.
Nice.
So the rest of the game was not exactly important, but the plan is something very common and something that you can go for.
Yeah.
So for this reason, I wouldn't say that this line is really challenging. It's not that black is going to be necessarily better out of the opening, but there's just not as much danger. Another thing is a capture like that. But here, once again, we get a type of Scandinavian, but I would say it's a better Scandinavian, because now the knights have been traded. If you think about it, it's exactly the Scandinavian, except the knights are gone, which
It's very
is
nice.
Which is an advantage, right? There's two reasons. One is that our queen is not going to get kicked by knight c3 with a tempo. And the second reason is that our castling is faster. So if anything, I would say the absence of these knights is just an advantage. So yeah, the game can go on. Of course, whoever is the better player will end up winning the game, so it's not still clear. But yeah, something like this, a very pleasant Scandinavian position, although it did come from the Alekhine. So there is some overlap of the Scandinavian and the Alekhine, but that will not happen in the main lines. So the e5 lines. Do you have any questions about the side lines?
No, absolutely clear, of course, yeah. So yeah, but this is of course the thing which can only be reached by the Alekhine, I guess. Well, there's other options, but this is like the typical line, so this is where it gets interesting.
Yeah, I don't even know how the other options would work, because it's kind of like we spent all this time only going with our knight. I mean, it can start... sometimes you do get the Alekhine from like some other move order, like d4 or c4 at the start. It depends what black does and depends what white does, but I think it's usually
very typical like that, yeah.
Yeah. So I remember that Arne had actually a different line, is that you used to play this against me.
Yes, yeah. Well,
I remember this.
Please, guys, don't judge me. Come on. I'm just trying to hunt down a little horsey, okay?
Yeah, it's not that bad. Of course, the main line is d4, so whether you can start with d4 or start with c4, it does not make a difference. But this a4 does have an idea of trapping the knight, so that is totally valid. The way to equalize here would be to play a4, a5, sorry. Annoying. So of course we're blocking it, and in case the knight gets attacked, then we have a pretty good place on b4, and the knight can stay there. And then we keep our same ideas and start targeting the center. So we let white have the center first, and then we start counterattacking it.
Then we take it.
So that's how we would play against this a4 line. It's not I haven't seen it from anyone other than from Arne, but it still exists, and that's the way to play against it.
I will show you later how to win with white like this.
In case white just attacks the knight immediately, here I would say this is also one of the pleasant lines, because we're gonna get control of the center before white does with d4, which is a way better version of it. So I would say this is also a pleasant position to play. Keep developing pieces, you can play d5 yourself, and it's not one of the challenging lines where you would need to prove your equality. So that's why I'm not really worried about these sidelines. And the main concerns usually that people have about the Alekhine, and the reason why some people are hesitant to play it, is because of the main lines where sometimes the computer gives white an advantage.
Let's see.
So we're going to attack the center like this with d6. This is the way we usually do it. So now there's two big lines to go. Either white goes for c4 or doesn't go for c4. So there's knight f3 or c4. I would say both of them are pretty good. So there's this is where you probably have to make your main choice if you are playing this as white. Depends what type of position you want to get. Probably let's look at knight f3 first. So I think lately this has been taking over in popularity, but c4 is still kind of the more like the more generally accepted way to play the Alekhine. Okay. But lately this has been good. So here as black, you have two options. You can either take on e5 or you can play g6. So g6 is more consistent with our typical ideas throughout this opening. So I would play this as opposed to d takes e5, but sometimes the computer prefers d takes e5 because it's more solid. So that's another option. I know Magnus played this against Topalov, so in a classical game, I mean. So
Oh,
that's why it was a bit memorable. So this is obviously a very good line. This one is a bit more risky, and the reason for that is bishop c4.
okay.
So this is probably one of the lines I would recommend if you're playing as white, because I think it is quite tricky for black if they don't know what they're doing. So now the knight has to go. So the knight has to move. It will always automatically move to b6. And here, unfortunately, for a lot of people, bishop f7 is not going to be working. So that's a tactic that we all know and we all love, but it's not working here. Because although e6 looks very good, but at the end of the day, you're not going to get much out of it as white. And although you win that rook on h8, it's just an exchange, but it turns into one rook for two pieces because the knight gets trapped. So actually black is winning here after this bishop f7 tactic. So that's kind of what you need to know and how to run away with the king and go to safety. So that line is not dangerous. The dangerous line, I would say, is the one here with knight g5. So
okay.
It's also the most popular line. The other moves are also good, but this one is just, you'll see, I just think it's quite dangerous if black doesn't know what they're doing. I mean, now you will know what all the best moves are, but it is just a bit stressful to play this line. So here, how would you defend against f7?
Yeah, I already see. So castling, of course, is the first thing you would think of.
Okay, so you're right. Castles is looking like a very dangerous line.
Yeah.
And although the computer will say that you're fine and you're not losing,
Computers.
but I just would not really. You're completely right. With Queen h3, it's looking very unpleasant, and it's not the type of position that you would love to play.
Yeah, what do you play here? I mean, h6 is terrible. I think h5 is also bad. I don't know. I mean,
you have to play h6, I
yeah,
guess.
the knight
And
goes back, and then we can jump into h6 unless the king goes to h7, or what's the idea?
No, it's just that it's like you're getting attacked and there's no counterplay. And too many tactics, like white is going to be better even according to the computer, not losing. But I think in a practical game, it's way too dangerous to go for that. There's knight f6, there's the pawn on h6.
Terrible, yeah.
Hanging. So it looks completely terrible, and I would not play that.
No.
So the defense against this is queen e7.
Yeah, that's what I thought. But there's not many other moves, actually.
Yeah, exactly. So I would say that if you do get to this position as black, it's still not a reason to panic. There's still plenty of game left because your opponent is not playing with an engine, so
yeah,
it's still going to be hard to convert this. You can either prevent bishop g5 and play h6,
I think that's
or you can be a bit greedy and take on e5, which I also like. And on bishop g5, you're going to play queen b4, and it becomes very unclear after, but you have some pawn, but white has some like knight f6 ideas or bishop f6 ideas. So there's that. There's also just h6, which is a bit more relaxed. But yeah, these positions are just a bit iffy, which is why I recommend this for, like, if you were to choose any line to play for white, it would probably be this one. It's still not bad. Like, the evaluation is fine. And once again, it matters how you play this next, as opposed to how you played out this opening. So it's not lost. It's not like way worse. So it's, in my opinion, completely playable.
Okay.
But it's just really tricky, which is why this line, I said it's tricky for black to defend if they've never seen it before.
Yes.
So that would be my
the trickiness is something I really underestimated in this particular opening. There are a lot of tricky things.
Yeah. And if they play c4, then we're getting back to all the main lines where could have played c4, where white could have played c4 even earlier.
Hmm.
So we'll go to the main position, which is this one. And here we're gonna play, we're gonna play knight b6. There is no other choice. And now there's many moves. Usually opponents take on d6. That's the most popular. There's also the 4 pawns variation,
Nice.
which we also see in the King's Indian. It's not just the King's Indian. There's also like in the modern, any opening that gives up the center.
Yeah.
As black, you do have the option of like white just completely taking up the center on every front. Has its own advantages and disadvantages. So on this 4 pawns variation, I would say this is probably one of the sharpest ones. And it's full of tactics. I personally, whenever I think my opponent might play it, I just like completely memorize the line because it's like it's super, super complicated. So on the 4 pawns, the one thing to know though is that you're gonna take. Now taking with the d pawn makes no sense because the trade is definitely not advantageous for black. For white is not good to do this, and black just has a better position already. So obviously white will take back with the f pawn, and here the main idea that black needs to do is just immediately start attacking white's center, because if you don't do that, then you give enough time for the opponent to develop, and you didn't use your counterplay. So that's the whole counterplay in the Alekhine and just in any hypermodern opening, is to attack the center while the opponent is still not developed.
Mm-hmm.
So that's exactly how I can show the main line. It's you'll see that it's crazy, and I don't even. It's not even up to me to like say why the move is good. It's just because it's so sharp that we're better off asking the computer to just tell us what is good, what isn't. So I would say that most people don't go for this. Like, I don't think anybody is really crazy enough to do that. But so d5 is the main line, which is the crazy one. But I think most people who play the 4 pawns, they go for something more calm, and you're going to get something along the lines of this. So now the idea is f6, so that's one of the ways to target the center, and this is what you're more likely to get. You'll bring the rook to d8, attack the d4 pawn. So we are attacking both of these 2 central pawns as much as we can, and hoping to win one of them. Now, I'll just show the main line because it's a bit too crazy for all of us.
It looks like, it looks so nice. And I don't know why or how I grew up with this, but always when the pawns are in the center and they're far, far forward in the chess game, I always think like, oh, that must be good. But of course, it isn't always good. It's not even, sometimes it's even bad. So it's...
the thing about...
I don't know.
You're right. The thing about these pawns is that they look very good, and it's not even necessarily losing, or winning. Usually, it's just if you are managed to keep them and complete your development, then they're very good, and you are better, and you will get a passed pawn. But that also comes with an increased chance of losing one of these pawns and just blundering them, and then both of your pawns are going to be in trouble. So I'll show the main line is that we play knight b4 to play knight c2, of course. So white defends it with a tempo. Knight d4, attacking our bishop. And our bishop goes to a weird spot. Bishop to d7, which is necessary and only move.
Are you kidding me?
Because we don't want e6. Well, here it's still e6 happens. So this is why it's crazy. I'm telling you, it's just an insane line.
Oh my goodness.
And believe it or not, it's fine for black.
Looks totally fine, of course, yeah.
Yeah. Well, what are you going to do as white?
Can I just take the... No, I can't. Okay, I understand.
You take the bishop, it's like it's an endgame.
Yeah.
It's a decent endgame.
We have a double pawn, an isolated double pawn, though. But we will get e6 quickly, right?
Yeah. So the endgame is not
sooner or later this
worried.
will fall. True.
Our king looked in danger, but this is why bishop c6, because now there's no queen f3.
Yeah.
So is there anything else that concerns you from the white side?
Well, what about, of course, I have to ask Queen h5. Is this any threat? We played
We're gonna play
g6.
g6.
Only
Yeah,
move, of course. Otherwise,
yeah,
checkmate.
yeah. So
The
if the
queen
queen tries
goes,
to
yeah,
invade, we're gonna play bishop h4, and we have our own threats on the king.
check. g3.
We're gonna take that. So
What?
that bishop suddenly showed itself. We're gonna play queen d6 castle long.
Oh, wow, what a sacrifice.
Yeah, it's like these lines are super complicated. And
Totally, wow.
the main line is queen g4, and with a similar idea that this, bishop h1, queen g7, and
Oh
queen
my
f6, etc. So
goodness.
I'm telling you, I don't think people do this too often, but if they do, you kind of know what happens, and you just need to be tactically very sharp. But I think we're gonna go to finally the main line, which is to capture on d6. I feel like this is gonna happen the most often, and what should have the most attention. So here there are two ways to recapture. So of course, we're not going to take back with the queen, but we will take back with one of the pawns. Do you have a preference? Actually, do you like this capture better or this capture?
Am I
Do you
an
know?
E
Have
or a
you?
C capturer?
Yeah.
Tell
Which one
me
looks?
if you're an E or C capturer, and I'll tell you who you are. Well,
Yeah.
I am an E takes D capturer.
Okay. So you're the more calm version
What? It
because it's
seems like.
symmetrical. Like it's more
Yeah.
symmetrical. I mean.
Yes, I
Um,
guess so,
like
yeah.
you're not like you're not unbalancing the pawns on different sides of the board. So this is
Also,
completely
yeah,
possible.
yeah.
More solid than taking with the c pawn. I'm a fan of c takes d6.
Funny.
So this one is more solid, more calm. You're just gonna play bishop out, castles, whatever. This bishop is gonna come out here or here. It's just a different type of game.
Mm-hmm.
So the one that I play most often and the one that I like is taking with the c pawn because I think it's sharper and
Okay.
has more ideas of its own. So now I'll show one of the other lines that I think is worth playing as white against the
So,
Alekhine.
fianchetto
Yeah,
is often used in the Alekhine, right? It's a
yeah,
thing which is like part of the Alekhine.
yeah. It's because the dark squared bishop is really
Sure.
good on that diagonal.
True, true, true.
So
Makes a lot
especially
of
now,
sense, yeah.
yeah. So that's how you would set up your pawns if you took back with the c pawn.
Mm-hmm.
If you took back with the e pawn, it doesn't really make sense to do that because the bishop can come out the other way. But here you're definitely going to do that. And to me, it has, I wouldn't say it's a lot of parallels, but some parallels with the King's Indian structure.
Yeah.
So just in the way that the bishop is developed and sometimes where the pieces go. So it's a bit similar. So that's why these pawn structures, the more openings you know, the more you can apply them to each other and use some of these ideas. So here, what white normally does, and what I love, is when they develop their knight to f3 quickly. Whenever they do that, we immediately, like, not immediately, but we will get bishop g4 in the future.
Okay.
So honestly, which is why if you were to play this as white, I would say that don't develop the knight to f3 the longer you can, because then you don't give the opponent an easy bishop g4 move.
Okay.
So
And
the line that you can, yeah.
So, yeah, okay, it is a pin after all, but okay.
So
Okay, I
here's,
gotcha, yes.
yeah, I can show, yeah, I can actually show why. So knight f3, completely fine, of course, like it's still one of the most popular moves that's played. I'm just saying from a more like psychological point of view is you've already like established where your knight is gonna go. And this way, it's easier for black to just develop their pieces because they're gonna play bishop to g4
Okay.
and have no problems with developing the king side. So if the knight is not there, then it's not as easy to play bishop g4, and you kind of don't want to play bishop f5 because of some h3 g4, and the bishop has to go back. Like there's just always that bishop can have some more problems on f5 than on g4, but on g4 there's never a problem. I'll always take. and it's a completely fine bishop for knight trade. So
Fair
this is
enough.
one of my favorite lines actually to play in the Alekhine. Like out of all the lines, this is my favorite to play as black. So maybe that's why I'm biased against this early knight f3 development.
I
But
just
yeah,
I'm sorry, yeah, but I'm just also seeing that if you take the knight now on f3, you just win a pawn on c4. Now it is safe, yeah.
exactly, exactly. So that's why white usually goes for b3.
Hmm.
And this is one of my favorite plans in the Alekhine,
Oh,
is to play d5 here. So now, of course, white will not want to take you and give themselves an isolated pawn on d4. So they're going to play c5 and attack the knight. Where do you think the knight is going to go?
well, it must be to d7, no?
No.
Gee, so of course
The
you're
only other option.
asking me the only other option, c8.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And this is one of my favorite plans that I'm talking about, is we're going to play e6, knight e7, and knight to f5. And
Okay.
I'm telling you, so many people blunder their pawn on d4. Like, it's crazy. Like, you just play a few normal moves, let's say rook c1.
Yeah.
I don't know, you play some a3 move to play b4 and whatever, b5. And then already, suddenly, it's so easy to get to like this position and start to have big problems with this pawn, right?
Knight e2.
Let's say knight e2, queen f6, right?
That is funny.
And it looks like white didn't do anything that was out of ordinary.
Yeah, true. That is funny.
So I really like this plan, and I've used it a lot in my games. Even I won I won a few important games with this kind of idea. Not because it's a great, not because it's winning, but it's because it's a nice plan and it's simple to play for black.
It's funny that so many people seem to play this main line, or not main line, but this line then, yeah.
Yeah, because it looks like there's nothing wrong with it for white. And
Yeah.
honestly, there isn't. It's just an easy plan that you can use as black and pose some problems for the opponent. Yeah, even I've seen some Hikaru games with the same plan. So it's like it's a very popular plan.
Okay.
But the line that I would recommend, that I was talking about before, is that from the white side, you know what the opponent wants, is bishop g4 and like an easier development. So I like to start with rook c1. And it looks counterintuitive to play that when you're trying to develop, but it's actually the best move. And it's, I mean, this is the best line out that there is. Against against the setup. I would say this is the best line. Now white plays b3, so to defend on c4. And the whole idea of this, I mean, I play this as white a lot too, because I've thought it was the most unpleasant to play as black. It's because everybody here as black makes like the same mistake or like similar mistake.
Again. Crazy.
What do you like? What would you play here as black? I just wonder if you would.
Since we're, I don't know, since we're at it, why not play e5 and then maybe f5 or something?
Oh, you found the best move.
Oh, thanks.
You found the best move. So e5 is actually the best move, and not many people play it from the black side because, because it just kind of goes into the end game. And whatever, it's an equal endgame. So I wouldn't mind playing this, like, at all, but it's just that e5 is not the main idea in the Alekhine. Like, it's not the main idea in the setup, so most people are just going to develop the knight. Play something like that. And this is more popular as a move, but it's actually an inaccuracy. And the reason why is that is this trick that white can play d5, knight e5, and bishop e2. So this is what I meant by the knight staying on g1 for now, because now there's this trick that we have our f1 marching forward, and it's just not a good position because the knight is going to have to move. So, yeah, whatever black tries to do, this is a great, positionally really bad choice for me. So this is why I recommend this line for white, because I think it's a bit tricky. But of course, when you're playing it as black, you will know that e5 is the main move, and not to fall for this like knight in an unpleasant position that will get kicked out.
I
Most people
guess
are not going to know this, though. Like online, never happens to me,
it
but still.
seems, yeah, because yes, Alekhine seems to be this knight next to the other knight position so often that people just automatize it, maybe.
Yeah,
Because yeah,
exactly.
knight to c6 and knight to b6 is a very common Alekhine pattern, if I'm correct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think that would be it for the theory. I can show you a bit more positions, or like I can show you some common tactics in it. But first, if you have any questions about the Alekhine, I know it's a very brief theory, actually. There's not as much because it's not a big opening, and it's kind of just like looking at one line.
Sure, no,
And
but for now, I understand. But so the main idea is that if e4, e5 is played, the knight goes to b6 in most of the cases. Then we push d6 forward. We will fianchetto on the king side to castle quickly, and then we have a position like this, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with this kind of position. We are even building up some threats. I mean, as I said, like e5, f5 maybe at one point, depends on what white is playing. Looks nice. Looks
yeah, I
nice.
would say e5 and f5 is less common. Like e5, you would
Oh,
only play in this rook c1 and b3 line.
okay.
But other than that, you would play knight c6, bishop g4, and attack the d4 pawn or the c4 pawn, like rook c8, and just try to
Okay.
target these two central pawns. That's the main thing. So let me show you a few tactics, I guess. So
Yes, please.
we'll see
Alekhine tactics.
if, yeah, so this one we haven't looked at it in the theory portion, but it can be an interesting tactic. So this comes from the four pawns attack, and you'll do a little tactical exercise in the four pawns attack. So here the main move is bishop g4. So whenever the knight goes there, we like to go bishop g4.
And pin it.
And here the theory goes that we can indeed take on f3 even without being provoked. If we're provoked, then we're obviously going to take it. But yeah, so now there's moves like taking and taking back with the queen. And my question on this queen capture is, can we take on d4? And should we take on d4 as black?
Well, probably not. It looks too obvious and too dangerous. So there must be something fishy with it.
So what is the alternative then?
Well, I'm looking at knight to b4.
Okay, so on knight to b4, I would also be a bit suspicious of that move.
Okay,
Because
true.
at the
I'm
very
just
least,
giving a pawn away. I'm just seeing that.
it's not even about this pawn. Like, you're threatening knight c2.
Sure. But I mean, you can easily block it with, I don't know, with, well, not
I
that
could try
easy.
knight
Yeah, it's
a3,
something
but
like that.
I can play queen e4
Yeah.
and
Okay.
defend it, and then a3 next move, and then the center is strong. So actually, you were scared to do it, but knight d4 is the right move.
Oh. Okay.
Why did you not want to play it?
I don't know. I thought that would something be happening. So what happens if the bishop takes and then the queen takes on b7?
Let's see. What do you think? What would you play as black now?
Oh, okay. You can take on e5 or even
Not only.
b2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not even
Not
only that.
even that only.
Because queen c6 is actually a bit of a
Queen
like
c6.
threat.
Oh,
right?
okay.
Something
What
even better.
to do here? Something even better.
Yeah.
Queen e3 check. It's
No,
not
because they're
better.
gonna cover. Yeah.
Not better.
So the best move is just the one that brings the last piece into the attack.
Rook a to d8.
We don't need the A part, but yeah, it's just rook d8. And
Yeah.
there's like mates threatened everywhere. And queen c6 is no longer a threat. So before queen c6 was a threat because the knight couldn't have moved and it would have like given the rook unprotected. But now we can just protect.
Oh.
8 threats are just really big and still
Oh.
e2 will remain. So that's the reason why we can completely take on d4 and it will be fine.
The internet was gone for a second, but it's back again.
Okay, great. So the thing is, black doesn't have many alternatives. If you play something like e6, then you're just kind of statically a bit worse. Bishop pair for white, center for white, and all of that. But yeah, actually on knight d4 though, white has one tricky reply, which is queen to e4. And here's the second tactic. How do you think black needs to be careful to counter this queen e4 tricky reply? And why is it tricky if you can find?
Yeah, I'm not sure yet. So, well, there must be something tricky. So I guess if I'm trying to defend the knight now, it might backfire for black. So probably the best move is to just move back, maybe.
That's the tricky line. That's the one that white is trying to trick you in.
No.
So knight c6 was the move that you wanted?
Yeah. So what happens there? Is it c5?
No.
It's not c5.
It's the reason why the queen came on e4.
Oh, is it c5?
No. It's not c5.
Is it c5 maybe? I don't know. What else can it be?
What is the queen doing here?
It's... Oh. Well, okay.
It's preparing this e6 move, which, yeah, maybe doesn't look too straightforward at the start,
Yeah.
but it opens up the king by a lot, and I think this is a position that you would love to play as white. And c5 indeed is the idea, but we just want to make sure that the knight doesn't go to d5.
I told you. Okay, yeah.
You were just looking a bit into the future. I wasn't even there yet. You were ahead of me.
Okay.
So now c5 is the idea. The bishop can come to c4. It's just very unpleasant.
Yeah, okay.
This is winning for white. So it might not look like that, but it is winning for...
It definitely looks like it now. No,
okay,
seriously,
good.
Yes.
So it's very good for white.
Yeah.
So the normal retreat.
But I didn't see that
this.
at all with the pawn push to e6. Sorry. So yeah.
Yeah. So this would be a better knight retreat, but still you're giving up the pawn on b7, and well, it's
terrible.
Pawn for pawn. No, it's pawn for pawn.
Yeah.
Because we won a pawn on d4 as well. So actually the best move is c5.
It is?
Yeah.
I would have pushed this immediately.
Yeah.
Well, there I said it again, c5, I knew it.
Yeah, exactly. So the thing is, we can't play knight, like the opponent can't take the pawn because of knight c2. So that's the whole idea. We just want to keep the knight centered, and that's what makes the position good. So that's just one of the tactics to know that sometimes you can take on d4 when the opponent gives it to you.
Okay.
It's not going to be always the case. So for example, if the opponent took back here with the bishop, like don't take it unprovoked if they're going to take back with the bishop, and then you can never take on d4, because if you did that, then this trade, like, it depends on the trade, but you just need to evaluate which pawn matters more to you at the moment, the d4 pawn or the b7 pawn. So which one is more dangerous? Okay, I'll give you one last tactic. I think it's very easy. Well, you're going to get it right away.
Let's see.
And this one actually happened in my game.
I
don't know how the opponent made this happen, but it happened. So my opponent here plays a3 to play b4 and b5 in the future. So what should black play now?
Well, of course, I looked into the future from the position before. And I already said I was pouncing on c5. I would say we just take on c5, right?
Exactly. So that's just a common tactic that sometimes people miss, which they miss a lot in blitz. They miss it a lot in rapid. It's just something that you kind of forget to look at. because the pawns just look very protected together.
Yeah,
But
true.
it is true that knight c5 is a very simple tactic, and
Yeah,
it's all because of that nice bishop that we get out at the beginning.
funny.
And the game went on, but winning that pawn matters a lot because it's a central pawn, and now black just has everything they could ever want. So those were some tactics that you could see in the Alekhine, and you're pretty much ready to play it.
Nice one. That's amazing. You've prepared all of this just for this lesson, right? With the
The
Alekhine.
theory,
Yeah.
I mean, I prepared for the lesson, but I mean, it's something that I play, like it's
Regularly.
something that I play myself
Yes.
as well. So it's it's just the common ideas that I use. I'm not gonna say that it's like most of my openings like that I play should be like learned at your own risk.
Yeah.
But but I think they're totally playable, and I mean they work well in my club, and I assume most people who watch our club players or online players, and it works for me in my club. It works for me at like when I play online. So of course, some top players might not play these openings, but I feel like that's kind of not the point. I always say that it's better to explore many different openings and finding which one feels the best for you and which one you actually like playing. So that's why I'm giving such a wide range, and I think we've already learned a few openings in this in our lessons. And that doesn't mean that you should always play like that doesn't mean that you should start playing the Alekhine if you don't like it. It's just about knowing the most ideas, and we see how openings kind of transpose into each other all the time.
Yes.
So one idea that you see in this one, you might suddenly need in another pawn structure that just ended up being similar. So that's why I'm always saying it's best to have a variety and try out different things until you eventually build your repertoire that you like the best.
Thank you for this, Svitlana, and thank you for your smart moves. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I learned a lot today, and because you learn a lot about all those openings, so it's really, really cool. All right, I would say we see each other soon enough again. Bye bye.